the growth of our trading partners.
Question number 3, the Honourable Phil Goff.
Mr Speaker, my question is to the Minister of Foreign Affairs and Trade. Does he have confidence in the Chief Executive of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade?
The Honourable Murray McCully.
Speaker, yes.
The Honourable Phil Goff.
Supplementary, Mr Speaker, does he accept responsibility for a botched restructuring process described by media commentators yesterday as being a complete mess, and which he in his letter of yesterday to John Allen says has damaged confidence, professionalism and morale in the ministry? Or is that all John Allen's fault?
The Honourable Murray McCully.
Speaker, the quote from the member is taken slightly out of context. What I will say is that the proposals advanced by the ministry leadership had some very positive features which will be profoundly important to the future of the ministry, and some other features that caused me concern. I conveyed my views in both respects at the time before the commencement of the consultation process, and yesterday, the consultation process having finished, I set out those views in a 4-page letter in a very transparent way, and I take responsibility for the views that I expressed in that letter and also in the communications I made prior to the consultation process starting.
The Honourable Phil Goff.
Mr Speaker, when the Minister told this House yesterday, and I quote, that the proposal that had been circulated from the Ministry staff, quote, comes from the Ministry and not from me, end quote, is it correct that he has been involved in these restructuring proposals, as the Ministry spokeswoman said today, quote unquote, throughout the process, that he appointed Mr Allen from the private sector with instructions to radically restructure the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and that the Public Finance Act makes the $40 million in cuts they're expected to make his responsibility?
The Honourable Murray McCully.
Mr Speaker, I'm not sure which of those questions you'd like me to answer, but
Order. The Minister only needs to answer one. Order.
I want to make it very clear that the proposals advanced for change within the ministry were developed by change teams established under the direction of the Chief Executive of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, as is required by the State Sector Act.
The Right Honourable Winston Peters. Order. Before I call the Right Honourable Winston, I apologise to the member. Now look, some of the sniping across the House will stop. There was some unacceptable sniping earlier on from my right, and that was unacceptable interjection from my left. I'll draw the line there. Any further sniping or interjection that's out of order, members will be in some trouble. The Right Honourable Winston Peters.
Can the Minister tell us who will be attending the current budget round, Chief Executive Allen or himself, so the country can learn how this previously appropriately funded ministry has been sold down the drain?
The Honourable Murray McCully.
Speaker, if I understand the member's question correctly, I should perhaps put it this way. In 2008, an additional $212 million a year in current budget terms was allocated to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade. In my first year in this portfolio, we took $115 million of that off the table, and subsequently a further $20 million in subsequent years. And if the $25 million proposed for further savings was to be taken, there would still be in excess of $60 million of the so-called step change funding being held by the ministry.
The Honourable Phil Goff.
Was John Allen telling the truth when in his briefing to the Minister as the incoming Minister of Foreign Affairs and Trade, he said that the government requires operating savings of $40 million a year from MFAT, which represents, I understand, about 10% of its total budget?
The Honourable Murray McCully.
As I've told the House previously, the communication from the government to Mr Allen was in the form of a letter from the Chief Executive of the Treasury and the State Services Commissioner, and the savings sought in that letter were $24 million.
The Honourable
Point of order, Mr. Speaker.
Point of order, the Honourable Phil Goff.
My question was Mr Allen telling the truth in his briefing to the Minister that he had to find operating savings of $40 million? That question was not answered.
Well, order. I thought I heard the Minister answer very clearly. He said the government actually, in a letter to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, had stated it required $24 million of savings. That seems to be a very precise answer to the member's question.
Speaker,
the Honourable Phil Goff.
why would Mr Allen, as Chief Executive, tell the Minister that he was required to find $40 million a year in savings if that's not the truth?
The Honourable Murray McCarthy.
Mr. Speaker, if the member had listened to some of the previous responses given by Mr Allen, he would know that in addition to the $24 million sought by the Chief Executive of the Treasury and the State Services Commissioner, Mr Allen and the management team of the Ministry formed the view that they would need to make some additional savings so that they could reprioritise expenditure within the Ministry because budgets going into the future were flatlined. He has given that explanation himself before publicly.
The point of order, the Honourable Phil
Mr
Goff.
Speaker, I seek leave of the House to table Mr Allen's statement in the briefing paper that operating savings of $40 million a year were to meet government requirements.
Leave is sought to table that statement from the briefing paper to the incoming government. Is there any objection to that course of action? There is no objection. Question number 4, Katrina Shanks.
Mr Speaker, to the Minister for